Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Daily Brief. The markets are waking up with some fire today. Bitcoin is tapping that stubborn 94,000 ceiling. Ethereum is pushing higher. Solana is climbing. And the whole crypto market suddenly remembered it's supposed to be bullish this cycle. And while the candles are trying to impress us, the headlines are even better. The world's highest IQ man has stepped back into the Bitcoin conversation, and the internet is acting like he just dropped a new chapter of the book of Genesis titled Thou Shalt Hodl. Gary Gensler is back too, saying Bitcoin is the only crypto that isn't a high-risk speculative asset, which is interesting considering he spent years treating Bitcoin like it keyed his car in a parking lot. Larry Fink from BlackRock doubled down on tokenization, reminding everyone that institutions aren't coming, they're already building. And at the White House, President Trump made two headlines in under a minute, floating the idea of no income tax someday, and briefly calling Kevin Hassett the next Fed chair before adding the word potential. Markets heard it, media amplified it, Twitter melted down exactly on schedule. And in today's episode of Crypto Surprises Nobody Expected, Solana's co-founder publicly praised Cardano's network design. How nice of him. Maybe next week, Ethereum and XRP will go get brunch. All of that, plus charts, sentiment, viewer questions, and your SENB project update, right here on the Wednesday edition of the SENB Daily Brief. Let's get into it.
You're listening to the SENB Daily Brief, powered by Whole Shot Coffee.
All right, let's kick things off with the markets, because this morning's setup is actually pretty interesting. Bitcoin is up 2.36%, pushing right back into that 94,000 resistance zone, a level it tested multiple times over the past week. We can see buyers stepping in with strength, pushing the daily candle toward the upper range. The stochastic RSI is elevated, showing momentum, but not yet exhausted. This is the kind of setup where Bitcoin either breaks through and squeezes shorts, or we see yet another rejection and a reset. But the important part is this. The market is showing no fear of that level anymore, and that's exactly how breakouts begin. Ethereum looks even stronger, up 4.60%, a clean push above that 3,000 level with a big green candle in rising volume. Stochastic RSI is curling upward, signaling continuation. ETH has more room to run before hitting major resistance, which gives it some breathing space that Bitcoin doesn't currently have. Short version, Ethereum is leading today's momentum. Solana continues its steady climb, up 2.47%. Nothing crazy, but consistent. It's trading around 142 with a clear pattern of higher lows forming. Momentum tools show a neutral uptick, suggesting accumulation rather than hype. And after this morning's story, where one of Solana's founders publicly praised Cardano's network design, the internet is watching Sol and ADA a little closer. XRP remains range-bound, sitting just above $2.19. The stochastic RSI is lifting from mid-range, but volume is still light, meaning we're waiting for a catalyst. XRP typically moves in bursts, not slow trends, so quiet periods like this often precede bigger swings. Cardano is showing some life today, up just over 3%. ADA has been lagging this cycle, but the structure is still clean. Long accumulation, low volatility, and plenty of liquidity below. It doesn't take much to kickstart a move. And yes, Solana's co-founder saying nice things about Cardano certainly didn't hurt. How thoughtful. So overall, a very healthy morning. Bitcoin pressing resistance, Ethereum leading momentum, Solana grinding upward, XRP waiting its turn, and Cardano finally smiling a little. The market isn't exploding, but it is building pressure, and pressure is exactly what we look for midweek. And that wraps up our market breakdown for this Wednesday morning. A calm but powerful setup, a market full of pressure, and just enough optimism floating around to make people nervous. That's how we like it. All right, let's move into the headlines because today's news cycle is stacked. We'll get into it after this.
You're listening to the SENB Daily Brief, powered by Whole Shot Coffee.
All right, we're back. And now that the charts are warmed up and the coffee's kicking in, let's jump into today's headlines because the news cycle is loaded, weird, and surprisingly entertaining. Here are the big stories you need to know for Wednesday, December 3rd. So first up, Kim Un-yong, the man often cited as having one of the highest measured IQs on Earth, has stepped back into the Bitcoin discussion. He didn't issue a detailed thesis. He didn't publish a white paper. He simply expressed support for Bitcoin's long-term outlook. And naturally, crypto Twitter treated it like Einstein rolled out of his grave and said, buy the dip. Look, brilliant guy, fascinating mind, but at the end of the day, the market doesn't move on IQ points. It moves on liquidity, momentum, and conviction. Still, big brains backing Bitcoin never hurts. Okay, yes, Gary Gensler is back in the news. In a Bloomberg discussion, he claimed that Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency that isn't a high-risk speculative asset. Which is interesting, because when he was running the SEC, he treated Bitcoin like it stole his lunch money. He wasn't praising the sector, he was drawing a line. Bitcoin equals commodity-like, everything else equals speculative until further notice. This continues the narrative we've been tracking all year. Institutions greenlight Bitcoin first. Altcoins take the scenic route. And BlackRock CEO Larry Fink appeared in The Economist, emphasizing once again that tokenization isn't some fringe experiment, it's the future structure of global finance. He's talking about real-world assets, fractional ownership, instant settlement, and blockchain-based accuracy. When the largest asset manager on Earth leans this hard in one direction, you pay attention. This isn't hype, it's groundwork. And over at the White House, President Trump gave us a 2-for-1 headline moment. While discussing tariff revenue, Trump remarked that the U.S. might reach a point where Americans no longer pay income tax. Not a policy announcement, more like a long-range vision. But the idea alone sent social media into a frenzy. Moments later, he introduced Kevin Hassett as the next Fed chair, then instantly corrected himself to potential Fed chair. He'd make a fine chairman. That one word, potential, saved about 50 think pieces. But markets picked up on the signal. Trump favors a pro-growth, cooperative Fed, which could mean a very different rate environment next year. Okay, yes, this actually happened. Solana co-founder Raj Gokal publicly praised Cardano's network structure, calling its design thoughtful and robust. How nice of him. Crypto diplomacy at its finest. The comment didn't moon Cardano, but it did wake up thousands of traders who forgot the project existed. All right, and those are today's headlines. A mix of brains, regulators, institutions, politics, and unexpected compliments. Next up, we dig deeper into the story everyone's talking about. All of it after the break.
You're listening to the SENB Daily Brief, powered by Whole Shot Coffee.
All right, let's zoom in on the big story of the day, the one sitting at the crossroads of macro, markets, and the entire future of finance. Because when the CEO of BlackRock, the largest asset manager on Earth, makes a prediction about how money will work in the future, you pay attention. So Larry Fink, along with BlackRock COO Rob Goldstein, published a piece in The Economist where they tripled down on their belief that tokenization isn't some crypto side quest. They're saying tokenization could fundamentally reshape global markets. Not maybe, not someday, but inevitably. In plain language, tokenization means taking traditional financial assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, credit, commodities, and putting them on blockchain rails. It means near instant settlement, transparent ownership, programmable flows, reduced counterparty risk, fractionalized access, and lower operational costs. In other words, the financial system gets upgraded from dial-up to fiber optic. And here's the part that matters for today's market environment. BlackRock is not saying tokenization will happen if regulators allow it. They're saying it's happening because regulators are already warming up to it. Bitcoin ETFs opened the door. Ethereum ETFs are next. And tokenization is the long game, the part where trillions of dollars migrate onto blockchains quietly, slowly, and then all at once. Now look, you don't have to love institutions to understand what's going on here. This is like when someone says they're just looking at a house, and then they show up with a moving truck. BlackRock isn't speculating. They're building. They're hiring. They're investing. They're positioning themselves for a financial system where blockchain isn't a trend, it's the plumbing. When the biggest players in TradFi tell you where the puck is going, it usually goes there. Short term, it fuels the Bitcoin first narrative. Mid-term, it lifts Ethereum and any chain that can support real-world assets. Long term, it changes economic infrastructure. So yes, this is one of the most important stories of the year, not because of price, but because of trajectory. And that wraps our deep dive. From IQ legends to regulators, from politicians to blockchain giants, today's headlines are setting the stage for the next phase of the cycle. Now let's hear from you. It's time for Proof of Thought, your comments, your questions, and the question of the day.
You're listening to the SENB Daily Brief, powered by Whole Shot Coffee.
All right, it's time for your comments, your questions, and your Proof of Thought moments from across X and Telegram. And as always, if you want your question bumped to the top of the stack, you already know the rule. Attach a tiny bit of SENB. Signal plus skin in the game is how we separate noise from value. First up, from Macro Wolf 85, Sen, is tokenization just Wall Street hype, or does any of this actually matter for regular people? Great question, and honestly, it's both. Wall Street is hyping it, but they're hyping it because it actually matters. Tokenization means cheaper transactions, faster settlement, and fractional ownership of things most people can't touch today. It matters because it's not about crypto becoming finance, it's about finance quietly becoming crypto. This one's from DeFi Degen Dan. Sen, Gensler saying Bitcoin is the only non-high-risk crypto. Is that him admitting he was wrong? No, it is not. Gary Gensler would rather eat a hardware wallet than admit he was wrong. What he is doing, he's trying to stay relevant and draw a regulatory line that institutions will now follow. Bitcoin first, everything else second. That's the real signal. And here's one that popped up a lot this morning from A-Day Believer 90. Does Solana's co-founder praising Cardano mean ADA is finally about to pump? Look, it was a nice compliment. Very diplomatic. Very wholesome. But Cardano does not pump because someone said something nice. If that were true, XRP would be $50. ADA looks like it's building energy. It's lagging behind the majors, but that's typical early cycle behavior. When it moves, it usually moves in clusters. Last one from Election Watcher 24. Is it realistic to think tariffs could replace income tax like Trump hinted? No, at least not in the near term. That comment was more about vision than policy. Trump loves big, dramatic framing, and that was one of those moments. What is serious is that he's signaling a major shift in how he views revenue, growth, and Fed policy, and those matter to markets. All right, let's wrap it up with our question of the day. With institutions pushing tokenization, regulators suddenly praising Bitcoin, and macro policy shifting, what do you think will be the biggest driver of the next leg of this bull cycle? A, institutional capital. B, technology upgrades. C, retail FOMO returning. D, political and macro catalysts. Or E, something nobody's talking about yet. Let me know in the comments below. And if your answer comes with a little proof of thought in SENB, you already know. It jumps to the top for tomorrow's show. And that wraps up your questions for today. Always sharp, always entertaining, and always a reminder that crypto has some of the smartest and strangest thinkers on the internet. And we wouldn't have it any other way. All right, let's shift gears. It's time for your SENB project update. The full rundown after this.
You're listening to the SENB Daily Brief, powered by Whole Shot Coffee.
This is the part of the show where we pull back the curtain and give you a quick look at the progress inside the SENB ecosystem, the token, the creators, the community, and the momentum driving this entire network forward. And today, we've got another clean step in the right direction. SENB is up again today, showing strong relative strength, with the market cap climbing steadily and 24-hour performance firmly in the green. Buyers are continuing to outpace sellers, and volume remains healthy for an early-stage community token, just solid, organic traction. And as always, instead of reading off a microscopic price with 9 decimal places, we anchor to what matters: market cap growth, liquidity stability, and holding behavior, and all three continue to trend upward. The SENB creator community is ramping up. More music, more art, more video submissions, and more proof-of-thought interactions on X. It's still small, still tight-knit, but the signal-to-noise ratio is exactly where it should be. And the quality of contributions has been rising every single week, especially as more people discover the SENB media ecosystem. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 underway. This means integrating creators deeper into the ecosystem, rewarding community participation, building out show formats, expanding the SENB media footprint, and refining token utilities along the way. It's steady, consistent progress, the kind that compounds over time. And the best part? SENB is becoming exactly what it was meant to be: a community-powered media network with real personality, real satire, real content, and a token that rewards the people who actually show up. No corporate fluff, no algorithmic pandering, just creators, conversation, and coffee. All right, that does it for today's SENB project update. As always, thank you to everyone contributing, tipping, building, and thinking. You're the backbone of this whole experiment. Now, let's bring it home with some closing thoughts. Wrapping it up after the break.
You're listening to the SENB Daily Brief, powered by Whole Shot Coffee.
All right, let's wrap this one up. Today was one of those mornings where the market felt steady, but the headlines told the real story. Institutions leaning into tokenization, regulators suddenly praising Bitcoin, politicians sending signals about the future of the Fed and taxes, and even a rare moment of kindness between Solana and Cardano. We truly are living in a simulation. But here's the real message for today. This cycle isn't being driven by hype. It's being driven by structure, policy, liquidity, technology, and conviction. These are the ingredients that build multi-year momentum, not just daily noise. And for the SENB community, every comment, every tip, every creator contribution helps this network grow into something real. Thank you for showing up, thank you for thinking, and thank you for being part of this weird, wonderful ecosystem we're building. Tomorrow, we'll be watching that 94,000 Bitcoin level, Ethereum's follow-through, and whether Cardano decides to keep waking up. And we'll see if any more high IQ geniuses, regulators, CEOs, and politicians decide to add to the chaos. Because they always do. I'm Sen B'Hiro. This has been the SENB Daily Brief for Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025. Stay sharp, stay caffeinated, and as always, think for yourself. The SENB Daily Brief is a production of Sen B'Hiro Media in collaboration with Whole Shot Coffee, coffee that fuels champions. Written and hosted by yours truly, Sen B'Hiro. Production, editing, and scheduling handled by Maya Valencia, who somehow keeps me on time, caffeinated, and occasionally polite. Original theme music composed and produced by Paul Hahn, the community legend whose beats hit harder than a Fed rate hike. Research support provided by the SENB community. Proof that sarcasm and spreadsheets can coexist. For more shows, merch, and on-chain chaos, visit senbhiromedia.com. Thanks for tuning in. Stay caffeinated. And remember, if it's not in the brief, it probably wasn't bullish anyway.
Set my wallet free.